So the key insight to blue zones is no matter where you go in the world and you see people living a long time, they don't try. They do not pursue health in the way we pursue health. We're going to get on that diet.
Yep.
I'm going to start exercising, and those supplements, yep, I'm going to get them and I'm going to take them every day. And the longevity hack, I'm going to try that. They don't do any of that. They just live their lives. And longevity ensues. Longevity is a product of the right environment.
So I would actually love to ask you to tell us about your background and how did you get here?
Sure. So, while most people are doing useful and productive things, and after university, I biked from Alaska to Argentina, around the world, and across Africa. It took me 8 years, but that really instilled this ability to explore and instilled a curiosity. After that, I started a company that harnessed the wisdom of the crowd. The idea was to solve ancient mysteries by basically crowdsourcing the clues to try to and then put them all together. And one of the last, we called them quests. And one of the last quests, in the year 2000, we read an article or a study published by the World Health Organization that found that Okinawa, Japan, was producing the longest disability-free life expectancy in the world. And I said, aha, that's a good mystery. And based on that, we took off on a really kind of superficial but still interesting expedition to try to explain why Okinawans were living so long. And first of all, it just set me on fire. It was very interesting to me, but also our audience lit up. We had about 3 times the response. So I pitched the idea several years later to National Geographic. If there were areas where people are living a long time in Okinawa, there must be longevity hotspots in Europe and Africa and Latin America. And I ginned it up with enough scientific rigor that they bought it. The National Institutes on Aging funded the early work, and we were off. That was 2004, and now almost 20 years later, I'm sitting with you, still talking about the ever-evolving story.
Yeah, that's amazing. So it'd be great to talk about what are the blue zones and how were they discovered kind of empirically, and what are they and who are they?
I'd say blue zones is actually first and foremost a concept. And instead of looking for answers to longevity in a petri dish or a test tube, to identify populations that have actually achieved the outcomes we want, which is live a long time, largely without chronic disease, and stay sharp till the end, by the way. And there is a generally established law that only about 20% of how long we live as a population is attributable to genes. The other 80% is something else. So I reason that if we found these populations where people are living a long time, 80% of the answer's got to be something that's non-genetic, and theoretically we ought to be able to track that down. The first part of that puzzle was really hard. We tracked down demographers, and these people they're population experts, and they're typically mathematicians and statisticians, but they're able to parse through worldwide census data to identify populations where it's reported they're living a long time. We're interested in not only centenarian concentration or centenarian rate, as they call it, but actually middle-age life expectancy, because that factors out infant mortality, which really skews things. And but the first, before we do any of these expeditions, we went and verified ages, because there's a lot of places around the world that have asserted to be long-lived, and people either didn't know about their ages or lied about their ages. And we actually confirmed that in Vilcabamba Valley of Ecuador. People don't have birth certificates, so we assume they're not right. And the Caucasus, people were lying about their ages to elude a draft, Stalin's draft. And so we're really careful about that. And once you find the population, then I had a very good team of academic advisors who helped us go to each of these places to find the correlates or the common denominators. That brings us to what are the blue zones, and there are 5 areas that we've confirmed where people are living the longest. The longest lived women in the world, Okinawa, Japan. Longest lived men, the highlands of Sardinia. The islands of, or island of Ikaria, Greece, they live about 8 years longer, half the rate of cardiovascular mortality, and about a fifth the rate of dementia that we have in the United States, which is really interesting. The Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, half the rate of middle-age mortality. They spend 1/15 the amount we do on healthcare. And that sends a really strong signal, I believe, to policymakers that we don't have to be spending $4.3 trillion a year to have a healthy population.
Yeah.
We're deploying it wrong here in America.
Yeah.
And then the United States is among the Seventh-day Adventists, who are conservative Christians who are living, depending on how adherent they are, 4 to 7 years longer than Americans are living, their California counterparts. So these are populations that I think have something to teach us.
And those the population of Adventists, they are an urban population, correct? Relatively, can maybe
in
compare
Loma
to the
Linda,
others?
urban, suburban, probably closer
Okay.
suburban. But the Adventists, remember, there's 25 million Adventists all over the world, and they live in rural populations, and they also live in cities. But the one we studied the most was Loma Linda, California, which is kind of it's not really urban.
Okay. But how does that compare maybe to the other 4 places that you mentioned?
It's a bit of an outlier, and not all of my team agrees on its blue zone status, but I was interested in the longest lived population in America, and they achieve it. I would say they're alike insofar as they have a very similar diet, mostly plant-based, but also they're remote. They're culturally remote. All the other blue zones, in a sense, have insulated themselves from the ravages of the standard American diet and our obsession with comfort and ease. And the other blue zones have done so by being geographically remote. And in this one, they sort of portion them or fence themselves off from the rest of the world in that they celebrate their Sabbath on Saturday instead of Sunday. So, if you're a strict Adventist, your kids aren't going to play football Friday night, and you're not going to the dances, and you're not going to the movies. And Saturday morning, you're focused on your faith, and you're going to the potlucks, and you're taking the nature walk on Saturday afternoon, and you're not doing much of anything until the sun sets on Saturday night. And that has an effect, in my observation, that Adventists tend to hang out with other Adventists. So you have this sort of positive feedback loop when it comes to behaviors and lifestyle habits. And since the ones the Adventists tend to follow are, don't drink, don't smoke, eat plant-based, low spice, focus on your spiritual life, put your family first. These are all fundamental Blue Zones idea that the Adventists are adhering to largely because of their religion.
So yeah, I would love to hear more about these kind of fundamental Blue Zones concepts or elements. And could you say that they are common attributes that you saw amongst these different populations?
Yeah, so all remarkably, no matter where you go, you see people living a long time. They tend to have vocabulary for purpose. They're not waking up in the morning with existential angst. What do I mean? Or what's my job? They're pretty clear on their place in their family, or their place in their village, or their place in their culture, or they tend to be religious, which gives people a fairly easy sense of purpose. They have these sacred daily rituals that unwind some of the stress of, I would argue, the human condition. People in Blue Zones aren't different than we are. They worry about their health, they worry about their kids, they worry about their finances, They worry about the same things we do, but what they have that we've forgotten largely, because I think our grandparents have done more of this, is they pray. They wake up and they say a prayer, or the Adventists do. They say a prayer between meals, which gets them slowing down. The Okinawans have ancestor veneration, where they'll start their day not, turning on their phone, but 15 minutes in front of an ancestor shrine, remembering where they came from, remembering they're not just a point in time, but they're part of a continuum. The Icarians and the Costa Ricans, they're shedding stress by making plenty of time to be social, by taking a nap, which, by the way, is not a kind of an age-old strategy, but really does work. You probably know it lowers cortisol and lowers your chance of depression. And I just took a nap myself. I feel really awake. And then the Sardinians, they, like the other blue zones, take plenty of time for social connection, but they also they take happy hour. They pour into their squares and they have a couple glasses of wine and with their buddies, and that's part of the wonderful facet of the human condition that makes life enjoyable, but also we know now tracks pretty clearly with adding more good years.
Are there other things that that you noticed along the lines of diet and exercise? What are some other kind of common principles that you saw?
Yeah, so I want to make clear that my work is not as anecdotal as it is an aggregation of the available research. So the demographics are pretty clear. When it comes to diet, yes, I spend a lot of time watching the way people eat, but to get at the diet of longevity, I actually have this book right here that does it conveniently. To write that book, we did a meta-analysis, which we found 155 dietary surveys done in all 5 blue zones over the past 80 years. So if you want to know the diet of longevity isn't a noun, it's a verb. Because the way people have eaten over time has shifted dramatically. I get these, especially these meat enthusiasts, they watch my Netflix special and they say, yeah, Buettner was talking about eating plant-based. They don't eat plant-based. I went to Sardinia and they were eating pork chops and prosciutto, and they're right.
Yeah.
But if they took the time to look at the way Sardinians ate before the turn of the millennium, 2000 and before, they were eating about 90% whole food plant-based, meat only 5 times a month. They're all the blue zones. The 5 pillars of every longevity diet in the world are whole grains, greens and garden vegetables, tubers like sweet potatoes. In Okinawa, about 70% of all their calories until 1975 came from purple sweet potatoes. Nuts for snacks, and the cornerstone of every longevity diet in the world is beans. If you're eating a cup of beans a day, it's associated with about 4 extra years of life expectancy. So they are eating meat, but about 5 times a month. Not a lot of fish, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, very small portions. A couple eggs maybe, but they're chicken that's running around the yard and out in the pasture and so forth, not factory farmed eggs. No cow's dairy of any substance. And then when it comes to what they're drinking, 6 glasses of water, teas, green teas and herbal teas, coffee, convenient for most, and a little bit of wine. A little bit of wine every day. I know the research that supposedly no level of wine consumption is healthy, but I can tell you in blue zones, people over 80, 90 have drank, the vast majority have drank a little bit every day of their lives, of their adult lives. And they've still gotten into their 90s or 100s, and they're sharp and they're enjoying life. And it's not mutually exclusive with having a full, wonderful life.
My grandparents came from Italy, and I know. And actually, in watching the Netflix series, the entire portion on Sardinia actually looked and felt a lot like what they explained their lives to have been like to me. And my grandmother actually lived to be 100.
There you go. Well, that bodes well for you. But I mean, Italy, even though we just looked at Sardinia, Italians live about 5 years longer than Americans.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, five-year extra life expectancy. And they eat pasta and drink wine and, don't work all that hard. And they offer us a pretty good, set of lessons that we ought to be paying attention to. Yeah. And by the way, I know all of this enthusiasm behind resveratrol and metformin and stem cells, and none of those offer even a prayer of adding 5 years of life expectancy at the population level. And here the Italians are doing it.
Yeah, I mean, my grandparents, they ate and drank everything, but they also had reasonable portion sizes and exercised and walked a lot, although they did immigrate here when they were fairly young. But still, I think a lot of that culture was just maintained. There was a feeling of, actually we always would end the meal with salad. We didn't start the meal with salad, we ended the meal with salad, and I don't know why, but I thought that was great, frankly.
Yeah.
It seemed to kind of almost like cut all of the pasta that we had eaten before in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, no, I thought that was wonderful. And I would agree, certainly we feel like there is no magic bullet here. I'm going off on a tangent here, but I attended this interesting conference called Aging and Drug Discovery Research, ARDD, Aging Research and Drug Discovery. And there were many talks on kind of like what is the next drug or the pill or supplement or food ingredient that was going to increase your health span, right? And it was kind of wild to be there and watch it, because the element that was missing entirely was generally having a whole food diet and making sure that you're moving throughout the day, making sure, especially if you have a lot of stress in your life, to be able to balance that with recovery and rest and a lot of these other elements that I know you've talked about that are community and family. And I love the way that you said it before. It's even having a language of a sense of purpose. So it's probably not just that one pill.
No.
That's hard.
Well, the problem with the sort of whole healthcare system, the economics behind them all hinge on you getting sick.
Yes, they do.
Pharmaceutical companies can't make money unless you're getting a prescription. Doctors don't make money unless you're coming in for a procedure or a test. Hospitals don't make money unless you come in for a bed and services. I mean, other than your own company, which I applaud, you're trying to help facilitate people do the right thing, the silver buckshot, I like to call it, instead of the silver bullet, getting ahead of the disease rather than spending to clean it up. And so it's not shocking that you'd be well-financed conferences on the drugs that are going to make us healthy. And I just think it's the wrong approach for two reasons. One, so far we don't know a supplement that's been proven to reverse, stop, or even slow aging. There may be some theoretical underpinnings to those things that mimic fasting. We don't know yet. And even if we did find that drug, there's no evidence that people would take it for long enough to make a difference. If you look at the recidivism curve of even pharmaceuticals, people you can get them to reliably take it for months, but you cannot get them to reliably take it for years. So, and then the third problem with relying on a pill or supplement, people take that and they say, well, I got my nutrition for the day, and then they go have a Happy Meal for lunch.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work like that. So I think the approach you're taking and the way you're helping people measure where they are today, and then really bringing the whole palette of evidence-based ways to make people healthier today, feel better today, and live longer, that's the responsible way to go. And by the way, I'll just say this now. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
100%.
And the beauty of what you guys are doing is you are measuring it as rigorously as we can right now, or as an individual can, certain economic parameters, and you're giving people a really good baseline. And for a lot of people, that's going to be a wake-up call to do their own discovery, to find the discipline, to find the presence of mind, to do the right thing. I applaud the responsible approach you guys are taking.
I mean, that is the hope, is that you're able to, in some way, shape, or form, whether it is through a product or together with your physician, generally understand where you are with your health, so you know where to focus. You know where things are easy and where things are hard. I mean, I'll say, actually, one of the things that I did inherit from my grandparents on that side was elevated cholesterol. Go figure. They were the Mediterraneans, but I inherited that. So no matter what I do, I would always have high cholesterol. And that just happens. We're all individuals. And it's helpful to know that, right? Yeah. Because if I didn't measure it, there's no other outward symptoms or anything like that. But even if you are not getting wildly rigorous blood tests or wearing a fitness tracker or anything like that, even if that is just not your bag, there are lots of other measures that I'm sure were kind of almost like happening organically in some of these communities. Like, can you sit down on the floor comfortably and then stand up again? Can you walk to your friend's house 5 blocks away without getting winded? Like, all of those things are measurements, right? Because you can look at your progress over time, whether it gets easier or harder. So, there's even measurement there, even where there's no inside tracker, I'm sure. And
I like what you were telling me before about VO max and how that's such an important.
Oh yeah. I mean, I personally, and we were just talking about this, love VO2 max myself. It's very easy to get a VO2 max estimate from a wearable watch like a Garmin or your Apple or something like that. It will make these estimates when you just go out for a walk, or if you go out for a run or bike ride. And it's a great marker for overall endurance, but also just generally overall health, because it's highly correlated with a lot of other measures of health and Healthspan, like your cholesterol levels, your inflammation levels. And so it's one of those things, if you just wanted to focus on one marker, if you move that one in a good direction, a lot of the other ones tend to follow.
Can a middle-aged person move their VO2 max?
100%.
And what's the best way to do it?
That's a great question. So one wonderful way to move your VO2 max is to do some type of aerobic training. And you can do some low intensity aerobic training, but also the higher intensity aerobic training will definitely help. So if you can go running, you might want to do some interval training. That could be helpful. But even if that's out of reach for you right now, any type of aerobic work, and that is really anything: going for a walk, going for a jog, a swim, hanging out with your dog and throwing the ball at the park, all of that works. So I think to something that you talk about a lot, which I really love, is you don't have to exercise in this really regimented way. Like, that's not the only way to do it. You can just live it, right? Going to the park with your dog and throwing the ball would be a great example. You're not exercising, but you're totally exercising.
Yeah,
right?
You don't even realize it.
Yeah, right? How fun to exercise and not even realize it, right? So, did you see a lot of that, when you were visiting these communities?
No, none of it. Yeah, except for the Adventists, you never see people exercising. Which is, I think, an important insight, because we spend over $100 billion in exercise programs.
Yeah.
And at a population level, it's an unmitigated failure. And people don't like to hear that, and people in the gym industry always get mad at me. But if you look, fewer than 24% get even 20 minutes of physical activity a day. Okay? That's fewer than 1 in 4. We'd be much better off, by the way, having walkable communities where everybody has to walk to work or school or to go get their groceries, like people in blue zones. Then 100% of people get 20 minutes and we're not spending the $100 million on CrossFit and yoga and Pilates and, these are all nice things, but we don't do them.
Yeah.
They're great theoretically and they're great sort of business plans, but for populations, they're just not working for us. They're not working. 75% of us are obese or overweight. And that number keeps going up. And we keep doing the same things, which is Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and hoping for a different outcome. So are there people who have the focus and the discipline to get that aerobic exercise every day for the next 60 years? Yeah. But I'm guessing it's single-digit percentages of the people out there. So I'm interested in things that will benefit everybody living in America.
So yeah, it sounds like you've been doing a lot of this work with the Blue Zones Project, and I would love to hear more about that because it is wonderful that somebody can take charge of their own health, right? It's wonderful to measure where you are, see where you are, want to improve, take steps to improve. But it's maybe bigger than the individual. So what have you been doing with the Blue Zones Project as it relates to policy and creating that environment where people are exercising without exercising?
Yes. So the key insight to Blue Zones is no matter where you go in the world and you see people living a long time, they don't try. They do not pursue health in the way we pursue health. We're going to get on that diet. I'm going to start exercising and those supplements, I'm going to get them and I'm going to take them every day. And the longevity hack, I'm going to try that. They don't do any of that. They just live their lives. And longevity ensues. Longevity is a product of the right environment. So based on that insight, it's now been 14 years since I organized the very first Blue Zone project in a place called Albert Lea, Minnesota. The idea was looking at all the facets of a community, of a city, of a population, and optimizing the environment so people unconsciously move more, socialize more, know and live their purpose more, and eat more plant-based and fewer calories altogether. Those are the 4 pillars. And if you put your Blue Zones goggles on and you look at every facet of the city, you're not looking for a silver bullet, you're looking for silver buckshot. You're looking for 80 to 100 evidence-based nudges or defaults that you can deploy at the population level. What does that mean? In each of our Blue Zone cities, we have 3 squads. The first squad is a policy squad, and they work with city council to go through and find consensus on policies that favor the pedestrian and the bicyclist over the motorist, that favor healthy food over junk food and junk food advertising, and to favor the non-smoker over the smoker. And in each of those categories, there's about 30 evidence-based policies, and we work with city council and make them go through every one for effectiveness in that city and feasibility in that city. So it doesn't matter if it works in New York City. Is it going to work in small town America? And you know what? Every time, Renee, when we take them through this process, we identify 6 to 10 policies in each of those categories where everybody looks and says, we could do that. And then somebody on our team makes sure that those policies, the timeline is managed to it gets passed, gets implemented, and in many cases it needs to be enforced. Then we have a second squad that administers a Blue Zone certification program for restaurants, grocery stores, workplaces, schools, and churches. And in each of those places, once again, we're trying to get them to change their policies and change their designs so people mindlessly are moving more and eating better and socializing more. And we make sure people, I bring up this purpose idea quite often, but it's very clear that people have a sense of purpose, are living somewhere between 7 and 8 years longer than people who are rudderless in life. And most Americans don't find purpose at work. Only about 30% of Americans find purpose at work. So we like to help people identify what they're good at, what their passion is, what they like to do, and then find a non-work outlet for it through volunteering or the community. And then a third squad works with about 10 or 15% of the adult population to become Blue Zones ambassadors. And they come into their homes and kitchens and optimize it so they mindlessly eat less and mindlessly move more.
So like actually people's homes, like
Yeah,
constituents' homes.
You'll notice on my counter, I don't have a bag of chips with a clip on it. I don't have a toaster on my counter because I know if you have, most of us are on what I call a seafood diet. We eat the food we see. So if I walk through the kitchen, I see a bag of delicious chips and I'm hungry. You know, I'm a pretty disciplined guy, but if I'm hungry, I'm gonna grab the damn chips. Same with a toaster, by the way.
You know, tell me about the toaster.
Well, this is a study done by Cornell Food Lab, and it showed you take a control group and a study group. And in the study group, you take the toaster off of their counter, and after 2 years, the study group, the non-toaster people, weigh about 5 pounds less than the control group.
Interesting.
And the theory is that when you walk through your kitchen and you see a toaster, that's a quick way to make something warm and delicious. And there's very little that comes out of a toaster that's healthy. You know, it's Pop-Tarts or bagel or, you know, piece of toast on which we slather butter and jelly. It's much better to have a fruit bowl, you know, which is, I keep this out. So what I see is this. And not that I don't like eating junk food, I do. But I just try not to bring it into my house. And if I bring it into my house, I keep it out of sight. And those are very Blue Zones consistent strategies. I wrote that book there called Blue Zone Challenge. Takes people through all the evidence-based things they can do to their home, their work life, their social life, their commute life, so that their unconscious decisions are engineered to be slightly healthier.
Okay, that's great. And actually, I should say that the title of this book is The Blue Zone's Kitchen, 100 Recipes to Live to 100. And that's the Blue Zone's Challenge. I also want to admit I ate Pop-Tarts for dinner one night last week. They were delicious, but I do try not to make that a habit.
It's a good square meal.
I mean, literally.
This is more rectangular, but
Pretty funny. I like it. But that's a great point about the toaster. I did not know that. I try to put whole grain toast in the toaster, but I do love some whole grain toast as well. But this is actually great. I'd love to talk about the Blue Zones Challenge because one of the questions that I'm sure people listening to this would love to hear about is, how can I, as an individual, you know, what are some things that you might recommend? So what are maybe a couple of highlights from that book that you think are easily adaptable for folks looking to make a change? We have to
adopt a dog.
100%, yes.
So people who, you know, it's the ideal Blue Zone strategy because, you know, the dog gets walked every day, and guess who else gets walked every day?
Yep. People talk to you when you have a dog. Yeah, you can meet people with a dog.
That's another good point. I don't have a dog, so I don't even know these things. But I know dog owners tend to be considerably less obese. About half the rate of obesity among dog owners than non-dog owners. The biggest opportunity, I would argue, is paying very close attention to your immediate social circle. That half a dozen people you spend the most time with and you regard the most. So we know if your 3 best friends are obese or overweight, there's a 150% chance that you'll be overweight. Alcohol and drug abuse are measurably contagious. Junk food eating, measurably contagious. Even unhappiness and loneliness. So while I would never tell you to dump your old friends, I would argue that the most important thing you can do if you want to live longer and be healthier and lose weight is right now upgrade your immediate social circle. Go out and find 3 new friends whose idea of recreation is pickleball or biking or golfing or whatever the sport is you like. At least one of those friends should be a vegan or vegetarian because they're going to show you how and where to find delicious plant-based food. If they come over to your house, they're going to expect you to make it, so you might even learn how to make it for yourself. And then it's really important to have friends who care about you on a bad day. That seems to be kind of the litmus test of a true friend. And this is, nobody can make money off of you by doing this. But friends tend to be long-term adventures. And there's this very clever researcher named Nicholas Christakis. He's at Yale now, he was at Harvard. But he's very persuasively shown that the people you let in the room with you are the people who are going to determine how long you're going to live, how much you're going to weigh, how happy you're going to be. Mm-hmm. And that's a modifiable opportunity for all of us. And so in this New Year's, instead of going out and some new set of resolutions of, I'm going to diet this time, I'm going to exercise, which you will fail at. If you look at the data, by January 20th, the vast majority of people who start resolutions are no longer on them. Upgrade your social circle this time. Make a new friend.
And actually, can you tell me about this concept of Moai?
Yes, so Moai is an Okinawan concept. It originally started as kind of a financial arrangement because there weren't banks. So a group of friends pooled money, and if one got short or needed money to buy seed or something, they could draw from the pool. But what it's evolved over time is a committed social circle. And you see it especially among older Okinawans. And they'll tend to meet several times a week. A lot of it's gossip and drinking sake, but a lot of it is, they're not lonely. That's off the table right there, but they're supporting each other and there for their friends in tough times. So it's kind of a psychological security net, but it's also, financial security net. One of the best examples, I kind of hung out with a Moai, 5 ladies who were 102.
I love it.
And the second night, one of the ladies didn't show up, and the other 4 put on their kimonos and shuffled across the village to go check on their friend. And, had that friend at 102 fallen, broke a hip, hit a head, it would have been curtains.
Yeah.
But you could just very clearly see this social construct is replacing, a medical team or long-term care. I mean, and it didn't cost the government anything. It didn't cost the employer anything. You didn't have to pay a premium. It was just this sort of beautiful custom that provided dividends daily and feeling good, but real dividends in times of need.
Yeah. It's like purpose. There's your purpose, right? My friends need me, so I've got to be around for them. That's really wonderful. And I think you were able to implement this concept, right, in one of the cities that you worked with?
We did it in all cities.
I mean, I love this.
In fact, so we did it in, this was probably 8 years ago in the beach cities of Los Angeles. They're called the Beach Walkers. There are 13 of them that came together, and they got to the point where they were celebrating Easter together, and when somebody got sick, the other 12 were at the hospital. I was just in so the beach, so Hermosa, Manhattan, and Redondo Beach, one of our big Blue Zone projects. Since we started working there, they've seen the BMI of that city drop by 20%.
Wow.
Stunning. This is measured by Gallup. And those beach and the Moai, these Moais that we deploy, is just one facet, but those beach walkers are still together.
I love it.
They came up to me. And so this is, it's very rare to see a diet last more than 7 months. And here, almost 10 years later, the beach walker Moai is still supporting each other. They're still getting out 2 or 3 times a week and walking.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So they're buddies. And would they have been friends otherwise?
No.
They were strangers, right,
No.
before this happened?
So we don't rely on technology or gadgets to put people together. We don't believe it works as well. What we do is we get them all together in an auditorium. We have a process where we help match people based on shared values, shared interest, and shared schedule. You kind of have to have all three of those lined up. Then you have the decks stacked in favor of a real relationship, a real friendship. And then we challenge them for 10 weeks to either walk or eat Blue Zones food. So we're organizing a social circle around a healthy behavior. And you find there's a tipping point after about 5 or 6 weeks when you kind of put the training wheels on and help people connect, that they become friends. They don't need you anymore. It's like, well,
We're good.
yeah, we're friends now. Let's get together and have another dinner party at my house. I'll bring the beans.
Yeah, I'll bring the beans and the sake. Oh no, I absolutely love that, and especially as we have aging populations and community so important. And you raise an interesting point about technology, and I was wondering what your thoughts are on digital communities and even these robots that they have that can now be companions for people. Like, this is where it's going, kind of whether we like it or not. So what do you think about all of that, especially in light of these in-person visual new friends communities live?
Well, I've been in this space for 20 years. And, when I first ended it, pedometers were the great. Pedometers were going to make everybody walk more. And the work-based pedometer thing. No, nobody wears a pedometer anymore. Then there's Fitbit. Fitbit's gone. I haven't seen anything that's made a long-term impact. Now, today I just saw an AI tool which gets you talking, and through the course of the way it sort of leads you down a path, it can identify if you're a suicide risk. So maybe something like that is really. I don't believe we're anywhere near replacing another human being. I mean, we're sitting next to each other. I feel your presence. I feel your warmth. I can tell you're listening to me. I can tell you're metabolizing. I know certain things I'm saying create an emotional response. You think of your parents and so forth. That if I fall down, you're going to help me up right now. That's irreplaceable.
Yeah.
I believe. And why to try to replace something that's not broken? I would be thinking about how to bring people back together in meaningful ways rather than trying to replace them with some, artificial intelligence driven app for our phone. But you can make more money on an AI app than you can bringing people together. So that's why we're going that direction.
Yeah. I think too, some people might be so kind of afraid that it might be easier maybe to talk to an AI rather than try to forge a relationship with another human. Although I do wonder if there's ways in which you can maybe learn to practice with the AI and then go ahead, and maybe that gives you the confidence to be able to go out there and meet people. Because one question that we did have that we were thinking about is like, what if you have none of this, right? What if you have no community? What if you live in a food desert and you're really depressed? What do you do? How do you create that atmosphere where somebody's going to invite you to happy hour? The answer is probably not a robot, I don't think, but
Yeah, and the answer is not sitting on the couch and shooting up with Ozempic either. I mean, it's the well, first of all, and people don't consider this, but move. There are neighborhoods, and I know you're from Boston. There are neighborhoods in Boston where the life expectancy is 14 years less than others. I'd be looking to move.
Is it Cambridge, Massachusetts?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But I know even in where I was originally from, Minneapolis, there's place called Seward, which is, low cost, a lot of public transportation, very walkable. People live 12 years longer there than they do in another place called Frogtown, which is a similar social economic. The most powerful thing you can do if you live in Frogtown is move to Seward, because you're going to live in a walkable, safe, the people around you, I know there are co-ops where you can get affordable fruits and vegetables, but more important, you can get easy access to beans, which I think is more important than fresh fruits and vegetables, because inner city people often don't know what the hell to do with fresh fruits and vegetables, but they know exactly what to do with beans. A lot, Hoppin' John's, or beans and rice, or beans and corn tortilla, which are, more blue zone food. So number one, think about moving. Number two, think about taking the time, the resources, and the efforts that you would put going to a gym. And think about, well, who are all the people I know? If you really sit down with your address book and go through, most of us probably know 2 or 3 people who are healthy, and could probably, if we invited them out a couple times, we could probably strengthen the relationship and grow an acquaintance into a friend. And if that doesn't work, what also works is go to a church or a temple or a mosque. Free and available to everybody, and those aren't food deserts. Very easy to meet people there. Volunteer.
It's a great one. Purpose.
And you're going to share values. If you love dogs, volunteer for the Humane Society. But just like everything else, there's almost nothing in life that gives us satisfaction that requires no effort.
Yeah.
In the same way, you're going to feel better about losing weight if you're eating a whole food, plant-based diet and getting exercise, as opposed to, taking Ozempic and sitting on the couch. You might lose weight both ways. One is going to be a lot more satisfying in the end than the other one.
I have kind of a technical question, which is about blood biomarkers, if we just go back to that for a second. So do you know of any studies, and I didn't see any, but I could have missed it. Have there been studies of either the Blue Zones project targets or, the Blue Zones areas that were talked about in the Netflix series where they have looked at blood biomarkers or anything like that? I'd say specific health measures like that. Just curious.
So Stanford's done a project in Costa Rica looking at telomeres and found that, they actually looked at the entire country. We found the Nicoya Peninsula through demographics. They, looking at the entire country of Costa Rica, taking telomere samples, found that the telomeres were longest, indicating younger biological age in Nicoya. And then they further associated telomere length with different lifestyle behaviors. Interestingly, they found the highest correlation or the highest relationship between long telomeres, which is what you want, and people who have children at home. That was the biggest predictor of long telomeres.
Like the children are living in the home still?
Yeah, so it's a
Are
grandma.
they adult children or are they babies? Because I'm
it's
pretty sure
grandmas
that
with
my children have shortened my telomeres.
Well, Costa Rica is a different place. And now they're looking at methylation. And the same Stanford research has now taken genetic samples of centenarians in Sardinia, Okinawa, Ikaria, and Costa Rica. So that's the extent to which we know.
So then we'd be able to look at their longevity genes and try and actually think about, because as you said, 20% of longevity could be explained by your genes. The other 80% not. There's always a chance to overcome whatever genetic risk or potential that you've been given, right, by lifestyle. For example, I have a high propensity for a very strong grip strength. I do not have that, but the genetic potential is there. But if you have the genetic potential for longevity, then you might also be passing those genes on to your children, and they could be alive and well in your community. So is that something that they'll be looking at, is whether these communities actually do have maybe a higher percentage of these genes that have been associated with longevity?
Some of that's been done. The FOXO3 gene, I know the Wilcox brothers have done that in Okinawa. But the whole genetic lifestyle matrix is so incredibly complex. You could have the gene, but it's turned on or off depending on what's going on in your environment. It's just, and some genes that are protective, for example, for surviving an infectious disease, are bad for a chronic disease. So it's really hard. I don't understand it as deeply as you probably do, and B, to the extent I understand it, it doesn't seem to offer an easy fix by just turning on some genes.
It's too complex.
For example, people in Sardinia have you'll tell me, you'll know the right pronunciation. It's a condition that comes from sickle cells, thalassemia.
Beta thalassemia.
That's it, So that it's theorized that they were able to survive malaria because they have these sickle cell genes, or sickle-shaped cells. But it has now given them a condition that raises their mortality in an environment where they don't have to survive malaria. So there's often two sides of the, some of these early longevity drugs stopped cell aging or senescence. But the other side of that is it made it more likely you got cancer, which is also a cells just replicating.
Proliferating.
So, I do believe that there is a chance for some intervention, and it probably lies in figuring out a way to manipulate our genes so our cells can duplicate themselves without the buildup of damage, of cellular molecular damage. That may come along, and I believe that is the best chance of real sort of anti-aging. But until then, I think the best thing you can do are the lessons we get from the blue zones, not only because they work, these are populations that live up to 10 years longer, but because they provide an enjoyable life.
Fair, very fair.
It's fun to connect with your friends. You feel good when you eat whole food, plant-based. When you're walking, you arrive to your destination with more energy and living with purpose. These are all wonderful ways to live your life, and they have better research and help you to live longer than anything else I know of.
Yeah, no, it's undeniable. And genetics, again, even if you are lucky enough to have inherited the longevity genes, and I say genes plural because it's not just one, right? It's not like you inherit this one thing and that's the magic bullet. It's still only going to explain 20% of the story. The other, the 80% is a lot more than 20. So 80% is the Pop-Tarts and the not sleeping and, not hanging out with your friends, maybe not getting that dog, all those types of things.
And
so
even
100%.
if we find the genetic intervention that prolongs a life, in Silicon Valley, we might just be prolonging shitty lives.
100%.
So what's the point?
Terrible, miserable lives. It's
working too hard.
I know. Which I think that's a great point, because actually the older I get, the more I think about working less, right? Because I'm like, what am I doing this for? I've arrived. Like, I'm here now, so I might as well just enjoy it. Like, I've kind of past that point of like, I've just got to get there. Like, okay, you've gotten there, you're there. So I don't know, hang out with your kids. Like, go laugh with your friends.
Very smart.
What else is there? Yeah, no, 100%. Is it okay if I give you 2 quotes and just have you respond to them?
Okay.
These were things that I really loved. Okay. The first one, and this is a quote from you.
I love it.
There we go. Perfect. Done. All right. Cut. All we have to do is shift the focus from thinking we are going to change 330 million people's minds to changing their environment.
Yeah, so when it comes to diet, it's like your politics. You know, the vegans hate the carnivores, and the carnivores disagree with the vegans, and should you go keto or paleo or Atkins or Pritikin? It's, you know, to try to convince, even if you found the right one, 9/10 of people wouldn't believe it because they're believing their own, you know, dietary ideology. And secondly, you know, people don't stick to things for the long run, and you can change an environment forever. If you change a city where you reduce the number of fast food restaurants and you make healthy food cheaper and more ubiquitous and more accessible, you are going to get an entire population eating healthier. If you can hound and guilt and chide people all day long to get more exercise, but if you take an unwalkable city and put in bike lanes, wide sidewalks, plant trees, clean up the parks, you will raise the physical activity level of that entire population by 20% or so. Forever. Way easier, way cheaper, and way more dependable than trying to, you know, you should be getting more exercise. And
go to the gym.
By the way, it's your responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're not a good American unless you get out and get to the gym.
Yes.
As opposed to, well, just make it easy for me to step out my front door, make it safe, clean, easy, fast.
I love that. I totally agree with it. I completely think that we put way too much emphasis on the individual and expect them to be accountable in a very, very challenging environment.
Yeah.
So when you talk about nudges, are these the nudges?
Yeah. The nudges, setting up a city that's walkable. And I'm not saying we don't need cars. You know, we're all going to have cars, but you can design a road for cars, like most roads that since the Eisenhower administration in America have been designed, or you can design it for humans that also accommodate cars. You're going to get a vastly different amount of physical activity from that one. You know, I've had the privilege of working in Iowa. The Blue Cross Blue Shield plan hired us to, you know, make 10 blue zone cities. And I remember going in these towns where, I remember one single mom, she had 4 kids, she made $800 a month. You look at her food environment, there was a crappy grocery store with almost no produce. There was Burger King, Godfather's Pizza, Taco John's. Politicians were telling her it's your individual responsibility to make healthy choices for you and your family.
Yeah.
And then you unleash her in her environment, and she's poor, she's tired, she doesn't have a lot of time, and 97 out of 100 choices that she confronts are bad. Now, whose fault is that?
What's she supposed to do? Yeah.
Yeah. So I say that if you're unhealthy and overweight in America, it's probably not your fault.
Yeah. I fully agree with that. Fully agree.
Now, you know, not to say, I mean, you know, there are people who make it a big priority and who can take in charge and they can override their environment. I think you know, starting by measuring and having good advice on what to do there's definitely a place for it. And there's a place for creating an environment that set people up for success. And it's having those two things that I think is really the magic combination. As part of my mission of making whole food, plant-based food easy and accessible in all Whole Foods beginning this month, you'll see the Blue Zone Kitchen, which are frozen foods, 100% whole food, plant-based, formulated for longevity with a maniacal focus on deliciousness. I say the most important ingredient in any longevity recipe is taste. Because if you don't like it, you're not going to eat it. So I mean, that's something I'm really excited about. It's my first foray into grocery shelves, and I think, you know, part of it's creating the built environment, but the other part of it's creating the retail environment. So it's cheap, accessible, and delicious.
That's wonderful. Great to hear it.